You and talk to you. We're going to have communion again today. You say, Pastor, we hadn't done this in a long time. It's okay. Did you know the early church did this every time they met? They did it every time they met. So it's not unheard of or unbiblical. It is something that you can walk in and do and be a part of. You can do this as a family. I recommend it. I recommend that your family gather every once in a while and just share this meal. Meals are so important to family, and one of the things I think is a tragedy in the American culture is that people are not eating together anymore. We have such fragmented schedules that kids eat in shifts and things like that, and I think that's a disservice to the American family because we work things out at the table, and we shared today the day's events. We dealt with the problems. We ate a meal, and I think it's a positive thing. We're going to come back to this table today, and I kind of hope today that we would discover that this is a place where we find concern for one another based on the miracle that Jesus has accomplished for us. Let me say that again. I hope that today that we rediscover on a growing and deeper level the concern we should have for one another based on what Christ has done for us. Based on what Christ has done for us. Not just, people do care for one another, but what makes it significant is when it's activated by what Jesus has done for us. That's what makes it supernatural. That's what makes it significant. That's what makes it life-changing. And I've had some people who genuinely cared about me, but the ones that really mattered were the ones who had experienced the grace of God, and they were trying to project that into my life. They were caring for me because Jesus cared for me. And that's what I want us to kind of come back to this today, and as we walk through this day, and I pray that your hearts will be open to it. I believe God wants to do some miracles today. I really do. I have come with an expectation and an anticipation of God doing something significant. And it's not because we particularly ask God to do it, but because we ask God to do something for somebody else. That we ask God to do something for somebody else. And so I don't know what you came in with today, but I hope you walk out with just a boatload of grace. A boatload of grace. You may not know what that means, but where God does something for you that you didn't deserve. Amen? Paul, in speaking about this meal, he writes to the church, and he just reflects on what Jesus said. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, I've read this every time I'll read it. I'll quote it before we finish up today. But in chapter 11, verses 23 through 26, it says, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This body, which is for you, do this in remembrance of me.' Same way after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" When Jesus gave us this meal to share together, he used the opportunity to teach them about what it meant to walk together and to serve one another. And it's interesting, in John 13, we get an amazing glimpse into what happened that night that Jesus shared this meal with his disciples, this prelude to his crucifixion and resurrection. As he gathers together to share what we call the Passover, but now has become communion for us. It says in chapter 13, verses 2 through 5, and then I'm going to read 12 through 17. It says, "And the evening meal was in progress," and that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the Passover meal. He was in the middle of this meal. He's in the middle of dinner. And here's what he does. And it says, "And the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying with the towel that was wrapped around him." Now moving down to verse 12, and says, "When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. 'Do you understand what I have done for you?' he asked. 'You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set for you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now here, I want you to just go ahead and get over it. I'm not going to wash anybody's feet today. Some of y'all got some nasty feet. It's like, some of y'all have foot issues anyway. So it's just, I'm not going to do that's not, and we don't want to get lost. What he was doing was teaching us about living a life in which we walk in community. And he did it in the middle of this meal where we walk in community, where we concern ourselves with the needs of others. He's talking about something that was profound. He's talking about serving one another, about caring for one another, about taking one another. As a matter of fact, Paul picks the message up and he kind of takes it to a new level, and he says in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry one another's burdens. You remember Jesus, when he was talking in the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, if a man asks you for his coat, give him your cloak also. If he asks you to walk a mile, walk 2. What he's saying is, we, in this relationship we have, when we look not to what we need, but what to the needs of our brothers or our sisters, there's something profound that can begin to happen. Because you see, we live in basically a selfish world. How many of you know that's true? It's all about me. It's all about what I need, all about what I want, all about my needs, and don't come into my space. Don't say anything. Don't do it. Just, oh my goodness. And here Jesus says, I got a better way. I got a better way. And this meal, this one, it's kind of a celebration, because aren't you glad that God, just in his love for us, didn't think only of himself, but he thought about us? Isn't that the message of the cross? Isn't that what it is? Jesus didn't deserve to die. He chose to die. Not because he had a great need, but because we had a great need. He wasn't doing it for him. He was doing it for you and for me. He was acting upon the need of somebody else. And that's amazing, because that's so counterintuitive. We got this thing, it's just make sure you take care of number one. And God just has this amazing thing. And in this meal, we get a beautiful example of why we should care for each other. And thank you today. You guys have been gracious and loving toward us, and we appreciate all your kindness to us. And it is a joy to be your pastor and to serve you and to be a part of your life. But if we really want this thing to explode, it'll explode because we care one for another. So I want to just share some thoughts about how this meal can have powerful implications for us in light of that truth. The first one is, this meal is a shared meal. I've had some amazing experiences in doing communion on my own, but it's really not meant to be shared by yourself. It's meant to be eaten in a group. It's meant to be eaten in a group. In the first church, in the early days of the church, in Acts chapter 2, and you get this foundation of the church and all that happened, the wonderful outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the church gets on fire, grows, just dramatically, and there's all this stuff happening. And then as Luke kind of wraps this chapter up, and he says in 42 through 47, he's talking about the church. He says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And everybody was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs were performed by the apostles. And all the believers were together and had everything in common. And they sold property and possessions to give to everyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. And they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. That's an amazing passage. If we could just live out that reality, we could change the world. Because you see, they learned together, they prayed together, they worshiped together, they shared together, they ate together. And when it's talking about they ate together this meal. They would come together and they would share this meal that Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. They would come together, they would share this, and then their lives were shared together. They would open their heart to one another. They would share their lives. They would share their possessions. They would share their needs. They would share their faith. They would share all these amazing things. And one of the hardest things for me, and just in disclosure to you, is to admit that I have a problem. How many of you understand that feeling? Man, it's easy, man. I can join with you, pray for you. But one of the hardest things for me to do is to admit that I'm struggling. To invite you to care for me. It's part of that's from leadership. You always want to project that you're strong and leading and going forward and, you got it all together. And the reality is that you're falling apart, all a mess and just junk inside. But you're going, yes, praise God, we're going to go get it. And then and when in reality, one of the greatest aspects of leadership is to be able to say, hey, I need you. I need you. I'm broken. There's something going on. There's something wrong. I need your help. I need you. You see, we're supposed to share this thing together. We're supposed to walk in such a way that we can walk together and depend on one another and encourage one another and pray for one another and share the life that we have. This meal ought to be a testimony, one, to share what God has done and what we need God to do. It's a shared meal. It's not meant to be just out there. You and I need to do this together. We need to do this whole thing we call faith together. You can't do it by yourself. Matter of fact, you will fail miserably. You will become that weird guy with weird doctrines doing weird things, and people are going, what is wrong with you? You'll be the guy with the box of snakes. Some of y'all are going, really? My friend Steve Emmett, he would never be a snake worshiper. His philosophy, along with my wife, is this: there's only one kind of good snake, and that's a dead snake. But that's what happens to us when we don't walk in shared life. We become weird. We become distorted. We become unhealthy. We begin to walk in ways that are counterproductive. And we can do that in a room full of people. You can walk and not share life and sit in church and go through the motions and do it, and you'll walk into some really unhealthy places. I just want to share with you, this meal is not just about us taking a ritual that Jesus gave us, but it's about us sharing what He has done for us together. Amen? Secondly, it's a meal of remembrance. It's a reminder. It's a reminder. How many of you have ever been in a place where you needed somebody else to believe for you? You ever been so broken, so overwhelmed, so caught up in the circumstances of your life that you needed somebody else to literally lift up your shoulders, to lift up your arms, to encourage you and to believe for you, to remind you of the promises, to remind you of what Christ has said, to remind you of what God has done on your behalf. And all of us have come into that place. That's why Paul says, carry one in Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and thus you will fulfill the law of Christ. He's saying, when you come and you say, hey, brother, I see what you're going through and I see you're overwhelmed, let me remind you what Jesus said. Let me remind you what God has done. Let me carry that burden for you. Let me believe for you. Let me pray for you. Let me pick you up and put you on my shoulders and carry you down the road till you can get back up on your feet. It's a reminder that there is hope, that there is potential, that there is promise, that there is something Jesus has done for us. Because all of us will come to a place in our life where we'll begin to think that none of this stuff is real, or that we don't know what to do, or we can't see the answer, or we're overwhelmed by the problem. And that's when somebody needs to step into our life and say, hey, I want to remind you, your God is still faithful. And you may not be able to believe, but I'll believe for you today. And let me remind you what God's done. I heard an interesting story this week about a young man named Traden Karsh. He's 14 years old. It's just an interesting story. My kids make fun of me because sometimes I watch golf on Sunday afternoon. They're like, Dad, that's like torture in slow increments. I happen to like it, and that's how I connected with this story. Interesting young man. He just grew up in a nice, wonderful family. By the time he started walking, he started playing golf. Became pretty good at it. And by the time he was 10 or 12, he was competing. And when he was about 12 or so, he won a major tournament in the junior league of the PGA. And people were seeing him. And it was about this time, a little after that, that his grandfather had picked him and his sister up from school, and they were heading home. And as they were heading home, they were involved in an accident. The grandfather and the sister were fine, no problems whatsoever. But Traden was severely injured. The whole left side of his skull was crushed. Rushed his parents to the hospital. Nurse said, I doubt he'll live through the night. 6 hours of reconstructive surgery. The surgeon said, we don't even know if we can put it all back together. And 6 hours, they put his skull back together. Went into a coma. They didn't think he would come out of the coma. They thought if he came out of the coma, he would not function or be able to live or breathe. They said there's really not a lot of good scenarios. The one thing that Traden had, though, Traden was a Christian. And his mom and dad, as you can imagine, were overwhelmed. And so his dad began to send out through media and through their church and through friends, and they began to say, if any of you know somebody or if you know how to pray, we ask that you pray for Traden. Literally thousands and thousands of people begin to just share. Because you see, I understand as a parent, you might be in that moment and don't know what to do, be overwhelmed by it. You might look at your son and he's just in a coma and filled with tubes and think, God, where are you in all this? They knew if he died where he would be, but they were overwhelmed. But over and over again, people begin to send messages. They begin to send timelines, and they would send at this hour, this one's praying for Traden. At this hour, somebody's praying for Traden. And I heard his mom say, she said this, he would be going through a really bad point, and I'd look over at that list, and I knew somebody was praying for my son right now. Well, Traden came out of the coma, and he began that long process of healing. He lost a lot of things. He lost all of his memories. He has no idea. He cannot remember anything previous to the accident. The one thing he did have is he still knew how to play golf. Matter of fact, as he progressed, went through therapy, his dad brought his putter to him. The dude was killing it with a putter. I mean, he was just nailing it. He had to relearn to speak again. He had to relearn colors. He had to relearn every motor function that you learn as a child. And as I looked at his story, he's 14 years old, had to repeat the 7th grade, but he's actually doing well, and he's playing golf, and he had a really cool event. Rory McIlroy, one of the PGA's big-time stars, heard about this, sent him a video, and then the PGA paid for this young man and his family to go to the PGA tournament where he met all of his heroes. It's pretty cool. But his mother said something that I felt was profound. She said this: "You have strength you do not know you have when you know friends and family are praying for you." When you don't think you have any strength, you begin to discover there's a strength you did not have. When you know those who care about you are praying for you. I watched the video about this young man. The last scene of the video is Trayden saying, because he has to really work hard to form words and to speak his thoughts. His last is, "Thank you for praying for me." Man, you got to remember. See, in those moments, it was hard for his parents to remember what Jesus had done. But somebody was remembering for them. Somebody was coming back to the table where Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." And they were remembering that Jesus, who conquered death, hell, and the grave, has also conquered the obstacles that our brothers and sisters are going through. And maybe they can't see it right now, but today we'll believe for them. The last thing is it's a meal of thanksgiving. That's what Jesus said. Paul quotes him, 24 of 1 Corinthians 11. And when he had given thanks. And when he had given thanks. You see, in this, he was even knowing that this was leading into his greatest hour of suffering, but he was thanking God ahead of what was going to be accomplished. We thank Jesus for all he has done for us, and we give thanks for all that his people have done for us as well. I'm going to say that again. We thank Jesus for all he has done for us, and we give thanks for all his people have done for us as well. Today it's been a privilege for you to honor us as pastors and to show your appreciation. We greatly appreciate it. But you know, that's not really what lets me know that I'm loved here, as special as this is. You know how I knew I was appreciated as a pastor? When I was broke down in Waycross, Georgia in the middle of the night. And Alan Adams hooked up a trailer and a truck, and he came and he found me and he rescued me and he took me home. He's had to do that more than once. That's how I knew I was loved. Or how when my dad died, and they had a service in Florida, and unexpected, and I didn't know it, you showed up. You know who you were. You came down there and you showed up to stand with your pastor when he was grieving. That's how I know. Or the meals you fixed when we didn't have the capacity to fix, and surgeries and things you've done. Or those people who have prayed for me every day for 28 straight years. That's how I know I'm appreciated. what you did is wonderful, and I am so grateful for it. But the proof is what you've done when I didn't deserve it. For the friendships I've had for 30 plus years, where you've taken care of my family and watched after me and been a good friend. Or for Tracy Valentine, who over and over again would go all across the state of Georgia just to watch my boys play ball. You say, what does that mean? She showed up for what mattered. For the people who have silently given and loved and taken care of. For Terry Moore, who's been a friend to our family, let us live in their house. My goodness, we invaded their sanctity. For you who have, through kindness and notes and, man, who prayed for me when I couldn't pray for myself. For Freddie Goss, who hired me. You say, what does that mean? I had never had a ministry job. He gave me a chance. Worked out. It's a meal of thanksgiving. It's that Jane and I go. You say, what does that mean? Hey, it means that I'm still cool enough that a teenager likes me. Who has got absolutely coolness written all over her. You don't know what that means to me. It's letting me know that this meal means something. That it means something. Yeah, it means that when I was broken and caught up in the web of sin and death, Jesus saved me. And that would have been enough right there. But what he also did is he planted me in this wonderful thing called the church. With people who love me and pray for me, who do battle for me. And that's what it's supposed to be all about. You know, last week, Sister Valentine got up and told about a miracle. First off, I thank God for her willingness to obey God. Touch them up. Just give you a report. Her son, surgery went really well. Did not have to replace his valve. They only had to repair it. He's got a long road of recovery ahead of him, but it went really, really well. God's good. What I want you to know today is that as we come to this table, I know how many of you got a need. Anybody got a need here? Anybody need God to do something? Okay. It's pretty good. It's okay. How many of you got a need? You can raise your hand. It's okay. It's not like it's a bad thing, you know. All of us probably, if we're really honest, need God to do something. All of us. There's nothing bad about that. Remember that first thing I started off with? It's hard to admit that you got, need. Listen, if we'll get over that, and here's the deal. What we want to do is, no, I don't want you to come up here and be all self-focused. What I want you to do is take your eyes off of your need, and I want you to look around the room and say, oh, hey, Lord, I'm going to believe that what you did on Calvary is good enough to minister and fix what's going on in their life. And so when I take this piece of bread, which is your broken body for the brokenness of humanity, I'm going to believe that your brokenness is going to be healing in my friend's life over there. When I drink this cup, it's the cup of the covenant, which tells me I belong to God and my sins have been washed away and I'm a child of the everlasting King, the eternal creator of the world. That means something to me. Well, I'm going to believe that it'll mean something for my brother or sister over there. Because I want to believe for what you're going through. You see, Doug Hopkins' son needs a miracle in his life. He needs a new liver, either by transplant or by recreation. I don't care which way God chooses to do it. But he needs one. Can we believe for Doug? Alice Wise is going in for some procedures this Tuesday. She needs a miracle. Can we believe for Alice today? My friend LD back there, he's fighting a battle. He's got the best attitude. But you know what? Can we fight for LD? Or for Rick as he's recovering? Or for whatever the needs are that are out there. I don't know them all, but what I do know is I can believe for you for the miracle God needs to do. Can we do that this morning? Can we make this meal about caring? Can we believe that what Jesus accomplished will work in our friend's life? That's what I want to do this morning. I want to see a miracle happen. Not because I prayed for me, but because I prayed for you. I don't know every need here, but I know that Jesus is big enough to meet it. And you may not be able to see that right now. What you're battling may seem stronger than you possibly can overcome. But I'm here to tell you, I will believe for you today. Because I know that my God is able. Traden said, he said it looked impossible, but God does the impossible. Aren't you glad that we can believe that this table isn't a ritual? It isn't a thing that we do because we have to. It's a meal that we get to share because God's done something amazing for us and for those we love and care about. I don't know what you're going through, but God's able. And I'll believe for you today. Can you believe for me? Can you believe for your neighbor sitting next to you? You see, everybody, whether they meant to or not, needed to raise their hand. I'll go ahead and admit it for you. Can you begin to believe for your friend? For that person, you may not even know their name, but you can believe for them. You may not have had a chance to build a relationship with them yet. There's some pretty amazing people here you hadn't got to know yet. But praying for them is one of the best ways to get there. Can we believe? I believe there's a miracle for my friend LD. For my sister Violet back there. There's a miracle for Violet. Yeah. There's a miracle for all the Alices in the room. It's pretty cool.